I'm trying to mesh this topic with the change in regulation across the countries, because as iFast, we operate in Singapore, we operate in Hong Kong, Malaysia, and India. And our only business is to deal with financial advisors, because we are a platform that powers financial advisors. Across these countries or any other country that you take, what's the regulation trying to do? What is the regulation trying to chart? The regulation is trying to tell everybody in between a manufacturer and a consumer in the financial space that you please start being absolutely transparent about your dealing with the client. And that is exactly what you see, whether it is insurance, where Narayan would have various examples to share, or in mutual funds, where most of us in this panel are associated with the industry. We would always be able to tell you that every other time there is a circular from the regulator, it's about disclosure of commission, it's about disclosure of conflict of interest. You take the investment advisor regulation that has come out, it says you have to have arm's length dealing even if you have execution and advisory, which is nothing but telling that you have to be transparent in how you deal with a client. Now, comes to the third part, which is the third F, FTF. The F is fair dealing. Before I get to fair dealing, I just want to wake you up because you just had some lunch and we're all talking here. No exciting things to see on the screen. I'm not a model anyways. So just a show of hands. How many of you in this audience feel simple is easy? How many of you feel simple is easy? Just a few? Just a few. I think the right side seems to say that simple is easy. In fact, if simple were easy, then all of us would have been doing the simple thing of walking for 20 minutes in the morning. Right? But is it easy? It's not. Many times we tend to confuse ourselves about simple things being easy. And earning trust is actually simple. If you really go to the core of it, earning trust is actually simple. But the feeling that we have is that it is not easy, it is difficult, and that is actually correct. So, to go back to the last in the FTF is fair dealing. And that again, I go back to regulatory changes across countries, including India. Fair dealing is seen as the benchmark of looking at any interaction with a client or any stakeholder for that matter. So what it means is that nowhere in India, at least right now, do you have a cap on advisory fees, right? Investment advisor regulation doesn't say that you cannot charge more than this. A mutual fund regulation which banned entry load and said that the customer can pay the mutual fund distributor upfront commission based on his evaluation of services. It never says that it is capped at 2.25. It doesn't say it's capped at 2. If somebody really wants, he can even take 10%. But does that really fit in the context of fair dealing? That's the question you got to ask. So whether it is fiduciary, whether it's transparency, whether it's fair dealing, at the end of the day, what matters is that if you do all of these while engaging with customers as an advisor, then you have a strong chance of winning his trust. And if you have won the trust, then you don't need a panel, because your job is done. So do keep F, T, and F in mind. That's what is going to differentiate a good advisor from somebody who is not. And do carry this in the back of your mind all the time that you deal with a client. Am I thinking fiduciary? Am I transparent? And am I fair? So that's what I would say for a start.
Thank you very much, Rajesh. That was very insightful. What Rajesh has very beautifully done is put a framework around the concept of advisory. And he's put three necessary things for an advisor to be a trusted advisor and probably also an expert advisor. Is one, he should work in fiduciary capacity, which basically means that he should be handling the customer's money with utmost care and to the best interest of the client, just like he would act on his own money. So that's a point that fiduciary briefly is. He's talking about transparency, which means it should be fairly transparent to the customer. What is he buying? What is he paying for it? What is the expected result of it? And how things are going. And if there is any adverse, if there's any adverse risk in what he is doing, he should be aware of that risk, conscious of that risk, and then take that risk. So that's transparency. And lastly, he talked about fair deal, which means that yes, there are certain places where financial advisors could charge a lot. There are also certain places where regulations have now made it very difficult for advisors to actually make money on the balance. But yes, it should be a fair deal, at least from a customer's perspective, very importantly. It should not be seen later. And in the light of transparency, the customer should not feel that he's being overcharged. Yes, if the customer is really happy with the service and pays 4%, then Rajesh, I personally don't see a problem with that. If he's happy and he pays money. But yes, he should know what he's paying and the deal should be fair. As the last panelist myself, I would just like to, talk about some of the things that probably were not covered, but I do feel that these are also very important. I also incidentally have an FTF framework, and we'll start with that. We'll start with 1F, which is fraud prevention. And fraud prevention around advisory, and not only around advisory, but also regulations internationally. For example, certain banks may argue that, or certain institutions may argue, hypothetically, that what they did in terms of tax planning for the customer, and this has happened a lot with some of the multinational banks and multinational institutions and various regulators like the US regulator, where they may say that they advise the customer correctly, in a sense, how to avoid paying higher taxes, how to arbitrage between the regulations which are present in various countries, both for corporates and for individuals. So is that the right thing to do from the customer's perspective? Is that the right thing to do from the advisor's perspective? Is that the right thing to do from the regulator's perspective, from an ethical perspective? And some of these places, the regulators have fined some of the advisory institutions very significantly. So this is one level of fraud, which one has to, it may be classified as fraud or it may be not classified as fraud. I'm just putting a point forth that one has to really deliberate when one is an advisor. As to, he has to take the overall picture into mind and not just advise the customer. And recently with, some of the incidents around Cobra Post, etc., where somebody may be telling the customer, which probably may sound in customer's interest, but may not be exactly as per the regulations of the land, may not be correct legally, may not be correct for him to do from the perspective of the organization. That's one thing. The second T which I have after F, which is technology. In a world like ours, where technology is playing a very important role, we do have to think about how do financial advisors, what can they do to maximize the impact of technology? And can technology be leveraged to provide better value for customers? For example, all of us, at least in this room, do a number of transactions. So we eat in a number of restaurants, we go to a number of movies, we do credit card transactions, we do banking transactions, we buy financial products, we fly airlines. So is there a way where, for example, through technology, a lot of these spends can be captured through net banking? If you're paying mostly, it's interesting, some countries like Germany, for example, they no longer have a checkbook given to retail clients. They do all their transactions only electronically. From money it moved to check, from check it moved electronic. They don't see the need for checkbooks to retail individuals anymore. So what happens is, all your transactions essentially are flowing electronically. And this would happen in India also. In the next 5 to 10 years, I'm sure this will happen in India, where the role of checkbooks is far lesser than it is today. And you have everything flowing electronically. So you can just transfer money from your bank, from your card, into the whatever service that you want. What does this allow? So if the customer wants, through a single portal provided by an advisor, his entire transactions for a month, for a year can be captured. And this data could be very valuable to an advisor. Looking at the spending pattern, looking at the purchasing pattern, and various other things, he could give advice like, maybe this bank suits you better. Maybe this credit card suits you better. Maybe you should fly this airlines in this manner. Maybe you should stay in this hotel. Maybe this is the kind of services that you should avail, and this is where you can save cost, or this is where you can save your time.